good one. I was pumped about it. So.
That's great.
All right. Wow, we're live. Friends, family, countrymen, Romans, lend me your ear. Let's see here if people can see me on Facebook because my Streamlabs is being wonky. Do I have a face? I don't have a face. Why is life like this? I told you the Streamlabs, man. I didn't know if the demons were going to be exorcised, so.
Yeah, right?
Real, we exist. See, the behind the scenes is my friend Derek. I am going to let him introduce himself. Safe space to have spiritually start chatting.
Thanks, Leo. Yeah, I love that, by the way. Rachel and I run an account called Your Favorite Heretics. It started on Instagram. And back in July of last year, we were kind of knees deep in sort of, process, if you will. And we found ourselves kind of at a crossroads where we were starting to be in similar spots. And Rachel actually had the idea. She wanted to start a little page called Your Favorite Heretic. And then she was like, why don't we do it together and call it Your Favorite Heretics? So
I love it.
The whole intention that we had the whole time was we wanted to do something that would be save time from having to answer, several say in your coffee. Let's just grab coffee. We actually, not to shame, so we actually have a coffee mug and some other stuff. It's kind of fun.
That may be in my shopping cart on your website. And we'll have, at the end, we're going to have you drop all of your socials, put all of your information out there, and then I'll also put that in the show notes for the podcast and in the comments for the YouTube and everything. We'll make sure that gets shared so people can check out that merch, so.
Cool. Well,
yes.
Anyway, all that aside, through different people approaching us and asking us what was going on, we wanted to consolidate our experience into one place to refer people to. And, we were a few posts in and sharing different things, and we kind of just decided to share on something called church trauma. And, definitely weren't the first people to talk about it. But I think we touched a nerve, and it just... people resonated with it, and it kind of went mini viral, if you will. And it was shared thousands of times on Facebook and Instagram, and that kind of just set things off for us. But, one of the things that I find to be incredibly rewarding and something that I still haven't quite wrapped my mind around, why us kind of thing, is getting to meet so many beautiful people who have had these experiences through church trauma and a lot of being confronted with horrible toxic theology and realizing that this is happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So many people are experiencing this disillusionment, and so many survivors of abuse are having to face being silenced and being gaslit and not allowing for their voices to be heard. So in a lot of senses, we want to help give voice to people who have felt like they have not been believed.
Yeah.
And many people, especially in the beginning stages, would DM us and said, I've never shared any of this with anybody else. And there's stories that would just rip your heart apart, and so I share all that because what started as something that was not really intended to be much else other than kind of a reference point for our immediate circle of friends and family kind of took on a life of its own. And so that's a little bit of the background of us.
I love it.
Yeah. So
I had a similar experience. So Conversations as an entity has actually existed for about 10 years now. Conversations was my attempt to not have to go to a shitty church once I moved back to rural Pennsylvania and Western New York from the city, because I went to college in New York City. I went to Nyack College and I majored in pastoral ministry, which is a shit-ass time to come out as a lesbian. And I was like, whoop. And then I just decided to keep coming out. I came out as trans later and then as non-binary. And now I'm actually re-coming out as a person who has a stake in the realm of religion. So it's kind of a reverse coming out here, my fourth time around, but here we are. And so Conversations was essentially the fleshing out of my capstone project for my pastoral ministry degree. So it was, if you would start a church, what would you do? What would it look like? Like, I have a whole business plan, and Conversations did meet in person regularly for spiritually minded conversation for the better part of 10 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it really ended up being a gaggle of queer people that would
I love
gather
it.
in like the basement of Episcopal churches and talk about things and like being like, can we talk about that here? But we did. And the same things that I see coming out of church in a beneficial way were happening through conversations. What happened to really set us off, by us, I mean me. I say us so I don't sound like a narcissist. But what really happened to set us off was last year during the pandemic, I made a video because there is a local pastor in town who I've done side by side videos like tearing apart his sermons on my YouTube feed if anybody wants to watch them. Conversations Official on YouTube. But he decided that he was going to preach that Black Lives Matter was evil, and it was because they supported LGBTQ people who are also evil and going to hell. And so I had a little bit of time between a haircut and a color, so I just took my phone outside and I gave like an 8-minute off the top of my head soliloquy that changed my life because that video went viral. But by the time the first day was over, it had 10,000 views and like 1,000 shares on Facebook, which like I've never had anything go even remotely viral before. But it got to this place where the next day when I woke up, 14,000 videos, and there's only 13,000 people in my town, just for comparative measures.
Wow.
So it'd be the point where I'd be going through the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru, and the person would hand me my coffee, crying and being like, "Oh my God, like, thank you for that video. It meant so much to me." And then the pastor went back and forth and made videos misgendering me intentionally, several videos. I actually am proud to have inspired an entire 5-sermon series on why gay people are going to hell. Yes, that was me. I did that. I'm very proud of it.
Wow.
But that was the moment where I knew, kind of how you had touched a wire, that was where I touched a wire, and I knew that people needed what Conversations was offering, and they needed it in a way that they could get during the pandemic. So I started the podcast and YouTube channel. And since then, it's been nonstop. I've made it a point to interview as many different people as possible. We've had like LGBTQ Muslims. We had a queer rabbi. We've talked to experts in systemic racism. People who run like African American Heritage Co-op in Buffalo, New York. All sorts of different people, because all of these things are spiritual. Wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, spiritual. Church, not church, spiritual. Because I believe that there's always more happening than just what we can taste, touch, see, or smell. And I also believe that American evangelicalism doesn't get to have the loudest voice or the sole voice in that conversation, right? And so I got to a point, especially with this pastor, which the reason that that anyone knows who I am on TikTok is because this pastor, I made a video in front of his church and they had a sign that said his name is Jesus. And so I was like, so I made a video and it basically said, so this pastor likes to misgender me. So I just thought I'd stop by today and fix his sign. And then I snapped. And when it snapped, I made it say his name is Leo and his pronouns are they, them. Just
I love that. Oh my
it
gosh.
went wild. But what I'm finding on every different platform is there are so many people who need to hear what is being said, and they need space to be able to be a spiritually minded person without the confines in constraints that are placed on them by judgmental others or by worries about orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Like, you don't have to know it all or do it all right to come to the table. And I really think that there's more similar than there is different when it comes to how we engage with different religions. So that's why I'm a heretic. I'd love to hear why you get branded a heretic.
Well, that reason has evolved a lot, obviously.
Right, as
I
these
think-
things do.
Yeah. I think for me, my first experience of starting to get people to either explicitly call me a heretic or infer it was around the time I started becoming more vocal about my disbelief in eternal hell. And, there's a few things that you don't question, and if you do, you start, swatting at the hornet's nest and they go crazy.
They do.
Number one, you don't question hell.
No.
Number two, you don't touch with the Bible and mess with inerrancy.
Nope.
And number three, when it comes to LGBTQIA inclusion,
Yeah.
if you start to preach that, oh my gosh, get out of here.
Yep.
It's like those three
It's
things I
like
feel
the
like are
Heresy Trinity or something.
right. That heretical trinity. That's
Yes.
perfect.
Yep.
So anyway, it just happened to be around hell, and I remember it was when my first son was born. I just was starting to have these questions that
Mm-hmm.
started bubbling up. Like, I could never imagine my son doing anything that would cause me to want to abandon him,
Mm-hmm.
or even more so, personally inflict harm on him,
Mm-hmm.
not just temporarily, but eternally,
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't receive my love or didn't love me back or
Yep.
did something so outlandish. I don't care what horrible things that he would ever do.
Mm-hmm.
I would never want to see him not just harmed temporarily, but harmed forever.
Absolutely.
So either I'm more merciful than God,
Mm-hmm.
or there's something completely fucked with my theology.
Absolutely.
And so I started to stumble upon different people. There was a theologian, Peter Hyatt, out of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I first started seeing some videos that he had that I found were very, very helpful. And then I started stumbling upon people like William Paul Young
Mm-hmm.
and Brad Jersak.
Mm-hmm.
And then, later on it was like David Bentley Hart and some other people
Mm-hmm.
who were just phenomenally,
Great
phenomenally
names.
brilliant
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
unpacking just that topic. Um, and, for me, I just, it really was, and I think many people feel this way as they start to reckon with how harmful certain theological ideas that we were handed are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like waking up from a really bad dream.
It
right?
is. Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit,
Yeah.
what? This is, and you begin to start putting the pieces together, the light bulb goes on, and you're like, I've got to tell everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like this fire was ignited in
Mm-hmm.
me, and it's like, number one, I don't want the divine to be painted in that way.
No.
There's no way.
Yep.
There's no way. And number two, I don't want people to live under that terror.
Mm-hmm.
I remember even myself there, one of the things that has been an unfortunate companion of mine over the years has been OCD.
Mm-hmm.
So I was diagnosed with OCD formally a couple of years ago, but have been dealing with it my whole life. And
Okay.
I just thought it was general anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the clearest ways it was manifesting for a good while was scrupulosity or religious OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was times where it was like I was living in an actual hell,
Mm-hmm.
where I was so internally tormented about the idea, am I doing enough for God?
Mm-hmm.
Am I doing enough to have the divine be pleased with me and accept me and love me?
Yeah.
And it was like, I could never do enough for Jesus.
Yeah.
I could never share the gospel with enough people. I could never read my Bible enough. I could never repent of enough. I had to find more sin to examine. And the on and on and on. It was like I was running 10 miles an hour on the treadmill. No, you have to run 15.
Mm-hmm.
You're running 15. You should be running 20.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this endless sort of ramping up to where
Yeah.
you never reach the bar.
It's relentless. And you know what's dangerous is that's kind of the structure of evangelicalism and fundamentalism. It's also the structure of capitalism and nationalism and patriarchy, but that's separate topics.
Funny how those are similar.
Funny, right? Weird. But this structure is set up so that we are lacking, we are shit, and we got to keep coming back week after week. And I don't have diagnosed OCD, and I've woken up in the middle of the night thinking I need to repent because if I die, like, it's serious and I'm going to hell. So I can only imagine how much more that was coming out for you.
Yeah. And it really was. And I kid you not. I mean, it was like during the thick of it was a good couple years where it felt like each and every day was living in the deepest pit of darkness. Mm-hmm. Like I was so ensconced or just entrenched in this heaviness. Mm-hmm. Like it was crushing my soul.
Yeah.
And through that, I realized that, I was so afraid of what if Jesus came back in that moment when I'm having these gnawing doubts and fears and questions and, this whole crisis, and Jesus would send me to hell.
Mhm.
Like, so there's so many people similar to that, and I've had several people even on our Heretics page be like, oh my gosh, I've dealt with religious OCD and I
Right.
didn't even realize it, and what are some resources that I could find out more about.
Right.
But the whole thing is that, like you even said, you don't even have to have a formal diagnosis of OCD for you to know that this harmful theology has
Mhm.
a real negative uh, and even abusive and traumatic effect on
Yes,
people.
it is tangible. Like bad theology has tangible effects.
Absolutely. And I it was, again, that was kind of before my formal deconstruction,
Mhm.
but that was the beginning of some things starting to turn over.
Right. Right.
And again, for some strange reason, there is this romantic sort of, and in a deranged way, like a romanticizing of an angry, retributive God that is bloodthirsty and
Yes.
vengeful.
Yep.
And it's like any sort of depiction of God as modeled by Jesus, like the Sermon on the Mount, and
Mhm.
all of the ways that Jesus was on the sidelines of society, embracing people who
Mhm.
were looked at as outcasts.
Mhm.
Like, that is completely ignored by American evangelicalism.
100%.
And they've elevated this nationalistic faith that
Mhm.
promotes a picture of God that is all centered in this strange conspiracy woven revelation-esque,
Yes.
just horrible theology that has nothing to do with revelation anyway.
And it's
Um,
so, what's crazy about that is not even traditional historical Christian thought. That's
no, it's
not
not.
it. I just recorded a video for TikTok. Sorry, TikTok, you're getting a preview of this. It'll be on my feed later. But I recorded a video about, someone asked me what is like the social gospel. And I was talking about how, like, if you look at Judaism, which, Christianity is modeled after, and then I put a parentheses, like, let's not even talk about the ancient Sumerians, but that's a whole nother day. But I put, I said, like, in ancient Judaism, salvation is a communal concept, and we've just
Yes.
Americanized it to be like this individualistic thing. And people don't realize that, like you said, it's a nationalistic faith, and this is not even what is being taught, especially in evangelical churches, is not even linked to church history at all.
No.
And
No.
that was like the beginning of my deconstruction, and now I'm like in left field, like, hey, maybe the Quran is equally as valuable. But I started just in college joking about how you couldn't even whisper the phrase biblical inerrancy without getting kicked out of my college, because how dare you question this, what has essentially become an idol to American
Yeah.
evangelicals. So I love that
Absolutely.
you talked about, eternal conscious torment, the idea of hell being eternal conscious torment as being something that needs to be deconstructed because it's not biblical.
It's not.
News flash for anybody who's watching, but the
It's
idea of
not.
eternal conscious torment is not in the Bible. I love that you talked about that because I feel like that's a place that we need to start with, because otherwise the bad theology puts us in this place of living in conscious torment.
Absolutely. It's that idea of, if you're living with this hanging in the balance,
Mhm.
your current reality is essentially so high stakes.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's the whole Pascal wager,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
you feel like, oh, I better not fuck up
Mhm.
what I believe, or
Mhm.
else I'm going to end up in torment for
Literally.
eternity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it's the more and more I've gone throughout this process, the more I see that the linchpin that is holding everything together within American evangelicalism
Mhm.
is fear.
Yes.
It's fear.
Say it again, man. Like, you're so
And
correct.
it's such an antithesis to what the gospel really should be, right?
Mhm.
Love.
Mhm.
And, like, talk about polar extremes.
Mhm.
And I think that we when we get a worldview that's so clouded by fear,
Mhm.
there's no room for ambiguity.
Mhm. Mhm.
there's only this dualistic right or wrong, black and white
Yep.
way of looking at everything.
Yeah.
To where if you question anything, I mean, you can see how the church is responding to deconstruction.
Yes.
Right? Yes. They're either trying to you know, use it as a way to spin it and profit off it.
Yep.
or they're trying to invalidate it altogether.
Absolutely. Completely.
And the thing is that they're not going to be successful in doing that. And but again, it all goes back to fear, and undoing the root of fear is really the process of beginning to liberate oneself.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you look at the narrative that's been spun just from the creation narratives, plot twist for those who are watching, there's multiple creation narratives in the Bible. I'm just going to be throwing out a lot of these for you, but if you look at the creation narrative that's in the beginning, American evangelicalism has said Eve took the fruit from the knowledge of good and evil. It's all Eve's fault. Literally, the crux of evangelical theology is based on not asking questions, not touching the tree of knowledge. And I think that that is a fundamental flaw, because if you're going to have anything worth believing, especially anything worth living for, especially anything worth telling other people, you better fucking know what you're talking about. And that is true of our faith as well. But American evangelicalism and Christianity and modernity is literally based on don't ask questions. And you can see that exemplified by how we interpret the creation narrative.
Well, and I think that if you look throughout the span of church history, and even in like pre-church history, like even during biblical times, if you will, the times where you see the most harm being done in the name of God is a lot of times when there's these power structures at play, to where there's the religious elite and there's the people who don't have the answers, don't know the scriptures enough, don't, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And these people in power prey on those who are it's supposed to be an equal playing field.
It is,
right?
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, most recently or notably, I guess you can go back 500 years to the time where, you know, the Protestant Reformation happened, and, you know, the whole taking of penances, you know, masses in Latin, you know, there was this huge chasm between, you know, the educated and uneducated.
Yes.
But when that was taken away, when you know, maybe the one good thing that Luther allowed to come about was the Bible being translated in the colloquial tongue. You know, that brought about to where people can actually access scripture for themselves and come to their own conclusions and question authority and not allow for, you know, the elite and power structures to take advantage, not just monetarily, but spiritually.
Yes.
And I think we're in a place in a time where our access to information, and obviously it's a double-edged sword. You know,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I say that with that caveat, but we're able to access still good, credible scholarship at ease. We don't have to go to a library. We don't have to, you know, we can access things in such a quick amount of time.
Yeah, not only do we have access to books, but we don't even have to go get the books. We can just look them up on this computer in our hand.
Exactly. Instantly, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, the whole point is that, you know, where spiritual tradition that, you know, Christianity has arisen from has gotten, you know, there's that cyclical pattern of the institution getting really powerful and taking advantage of people who feel some in being indebted to them in some capacity, either for a need in order to be connected to God or whatever it may be. So the whole thing that I love that deconstruction is accomplishing is allowing for people to reclaim their agency.
Absolutely.
Is allowing people to have spiritual freedom and autonomy to be able to come to conclusions that are heretical, that are heterodoxical, that are unconventional. Because at the end of the day, those are the people that are the forerunners of the future's orthodoxy, if you want to get really formal here.
Absolutely.
So
I 100% agree with that. And that's one of the reasons that I came up with a title that I really hope is clickbait, because both of us need to go viral. But also, it's so spot on, because I really believe that being a heretic is a holy act. And I hope people jump on me for that. Because if you look back in the Greek, this was in the beginning of one of Rob Bell's book. I want to say Love Wins, but like, oh god, I just said Rob Bell. So most fundies and evangelicals have already pushed me out of the sideways. You know what I mean? But in the beginning of one of his books, I think it's Love Wins, he talks about what heretic means in Greek, and it essentially means like one who wants to know. Essentially, like one who wants to study, one who wants to learn, one who wants to know. And I think that if you are going to have anything worth believing, you should want to know everything about it, and you should have the autonomy to go and to learn and to do. Everybody's like, oh yeah, the mass should have been in the language of the people, and the Bible should be available. But then the second I want to read the Bible and tell you that I've actually done some serious scholarly study and I have a different thought than you all of a sudden think that the Bible shouldn't be available to the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it is a holy act. I think it is, in fact, a sacrament to take your religion and to say why. And not to get the answer from another person, but for you to sit with it, for you to dialogue about it, for you to chew on it, and for you to let those thoughts engage with how you see the world, act in the world, what you do in the world. That's a holy act. I think being a heretic is something that ultimately you should aspire to, because we should all be have intellectual integrity and intellectual honesty. Absolutely. In our spiritual pursuits, whatever they may be. You know what I mean?
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, when you remove the high stakes, the fear of what if I get it wrong and end up in hell, and that's debunked, there's this breath of fresh air, this sigh of relief, like, there's not this pressure weighing on me to get all the answers right. Yeah. I can have more questions than answers, and that's okay.
Yes.
That's really okay.
It's great. It is, in fact, admirable.
Yeah. And so there's this, I don't know, and again, I want to be sensitive to our viewers, but I almost find it very similar to when Jesus said the kingdom belongs to the little ones, right? And it's like there's this playful, childlike curiosity about the cosmos and existence and ourselves and the world and the divine and our desires and our sexuality and our purpose and our, all these things that matter, but there's not you need to answer these questions like me or else.
Yes, exactly.
You can explore. You're free to arrive at different places, and guess what? You're as loved and accepted, and you belong no matter where you end up.
Yes. And I'm actually working on a book at the moment, which I don't know if it'll end up being like my thesis, but my goal is to get my PhD in queer theology. When I say queer theology, I need people to understand I'm not just talking about orientation. What I am talking about when I'm talking about the act of queering is the dissolution of binaries that are artificially placed. Because the world doesn't function in a binary nature. If you look in nature, it's not this or that. It's not one or the other, very infrequently, right? And I think that people have made church one or the other so that they can declare, it's a power imbalance, so that they can declare who's in and who's out, right? But I think church originally was a queer place. And what I mean by queer place is it was decentralized. If you look at the church in antiquity, if you look at how newsflash, it wasn't Christianity first, right? Christianity wasn't a thing until way later on. But if you look at the roots of Judaism, right? Pre-temple periods, both temple periods, the religion happened in the fields, on altars in people's houses, in their living rooms, around their dinner tables, while they were watching their sheep. Church was decentralized. Church was queer originally. Church was a thing, and faith was a thing, and spiritual community was a thing that happened outside of the institution. The only reason, in my humble opinion, the only reason that the institution came about was to centralize and consolidate power. And I think that we have bastardized what faith is. And I have to put a caveat out there that I'm speaking from a Christian language because that is my first language. But when I'm saying this, this idea for me blows out to all of spirituality and religion, right? Is this idea of
Absolutely.
consolidation of power to control who's in and who's out. And I think the value of the heretics is to be like, no, you know what I mean? Like, no,
Yeah.
because I believe that we need to actively return or actively queer what church is, and by church I mean moments of intellectual and spiritual connection, right? Community. That needs to be queered because it was never supposed to be in the hands of the few. It was always supposed to be in the hands of the many. And I feel like the heretics are the real ones doing the work to hold to that value of saying like why you and why not me. And I'm not saying I should be the head of everything, but I'm just saying why you and why not me. And if you get offended by that question, you probably benefit from some sort of privilege that you don't want to admit you have.
Amen to that. That's so true.
It's just a thing, and like they want to keep us separated. That's another part about the institution, and another reason that heretics have value is because if we can find each other as other heretics and we can continue to ask questions, we can create safe space for other people to have questions and for the results to not be so anxiety producing. Because like
Right.
you know, I'm sure that you felt this, and it was also something that I felt when I first started. I was like, I'm the only one. It's me and I'm going to hell. Because at that point I still believed in it. We're in a whole other boat now. But, you
Yeah.
know, heretics are in essence building the church by creating community that is intentionally designed for as a safe space for spiritual conversation.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and we align as well. One of the first words that we thought of to describe kind of the mission, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
of what we were getting after is to create a safe space for people deconstructing
Yeah.
and recovering from church trauma.
Yeah.
And, I think that so many of us have not known what it's like to have our nervous systems unactivated in a spiritual environment, to not feel like we're in a position of where we have to, kind of sleep with one eye open, if you
Mm-hmm.
will,
Mm-hmm.
and like always being on guard of,
Mm-hmm.
are we going to be receiving some teaching or some signaling of exclusion
Yep.
or, judgment or whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
that we're familiar with in fundamentalism.
Yeah.
The whole idea is that safety honestly is foreign to us,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately.
Yep.
And I think that's why these spaces like you're doing, and what we're trying to do and so many other wonderful people are trying to get after is trying to form genuine connectivity
Mm-hmm.
to one another, that it's not about fitting a mold, or
Right.
it's about breaking the mold.
Right.
It's about taking the lid off,
Mm-hmm.
and completely letting everyone loose and free.
Yeah. I think that's another thing that, along with the value of heresy, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is that emotional trauma and mental trauma that we go through when we try to break away from these systems. And I know that this, in particular, is not exclusive to Christianity. This is something that people experience when they come from all sorts of different spiritual backgrounds that thrive on being cloistered, right? And I think the idea of religious trauma is very real. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because I think that's another conversation that needs to be had. Because there is a very real collective trauma that happens when you leave the center of everything you've ever known. And I would love to just kind of talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like that's something that I've really personally had to go through. That the whole when I first came out, I let myself be subject to not one, not two, but three actual exorcisms. Because my whole standpoint was they're not going to say I didn't try it. Right now, jury's still out. Like I've since transitioned and I identify as non-binary. So either the exorcisms were shit or they were so good, like I'm a man now. The jury's still out. But I put myself through that because I didn't I really at that point was on the fence 50-50. Like I thought there might be a chance that might really be a cataclysmic shift that moved me away from being queer. And it makes me feel sad to admit that now, but I let myself go through that. And there were many people who were happy to put me through that, right, in the name of Christian love. And I think that when you come up from out of a place where you are really told you have to fit that mold, there's a certain amount of emotional turmoil, and it really is, like you said, sleeping with one eye open. It's the same thing as being in an abusive relationship. When is the other foot going to drop? When are they going to walk through the door happy, or are they going to walk through the door angry? Is this the day they're going to use? Like all of these different abusive situations that people find themselves in do the same things to our nervous systems that living with abusive partners or abusive others does. And I think that people don't always we talk about the emotional a lot, but there are really physical side effects to that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that it starts even from the very early stages when that whole shitty theology of original sin is introduced to children that, hey, you're just born wicked and sinful, and, you know, just your heart's deceitful and all these. I mean, what a horrible thing.
Horrible.
To teach a child.
Yeah.
To distrust themselves and to be skeptical of their desires and their thoughts. I mean, to this day, I struggle making decisions largely, I think, because I've been so fucking hardwired that I can't trust myself.
Yep.
That I'm inherently gonna fuck something up cosmically or whatever. That, you know, I remember I used to pray about what fucking size drink I should get at Starbucks. That's how bad it was. I mean, ridiculous. It's funny.
And
but
it is, but the system's set up to reinforce that chemical imbalance that you already had.
Right. And so my point is that, you know, when you indoctrinate someone so heavily from a young age, and even if one's experience with Christianity was even from, you know, an older age, like my wife didn't convert to Christianity until she was 20.
Okay.
And very short stint within Christianity. But it was enough for her to experience trauma herself. And again, it all looks different for different people.
Absolutely.
But I think the important part is to, number one, we're huge advocates of finding, you know, therapists. You know, there's actually a really great group, the Religious Trauma Institute is wonderful.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yes. Yeah.
And then also the Reclamation Collective. Both are phenomenal. They're connected. But we've done some work with Reclamation Collective in particular. My wife just spoke to Dr. Laura Anderson on Sunday.
Okay.
Who is one of the co-founders of Religious Trauma Institute, I believe. And anyway, all that to be said, there are, you know, it's so amazing as well to be able to also move into advocating for mental health as well, because I know so many of us growing up were told it's just a sin issue. It's just
pray it away.
Right. Oh yeah, problem solved. Here's a verse.
Boom.
You know,
done.
I feel better now.
Well, that's all it took. Holy shit, that was all it took, bro.
My depression is gone.
Gone.
So, anyway, yeah, I mean, again, what I think is so consistent across the board of what many of us are advocating for as well is healing. We all want to be more ourselves, more intimate with who we are.
Yep.
Because a lot of our upbringing, we were taught, hey, it's not safe to be who you are.
Absolutely.
Who you are is bad.
Yep.
Right? Who you are is not enough.
Yep.
Who you are is not good enough to God, not good enough for your community around you, not good enough for you being able to live a meaningful life.
Absolutely.
And all of that is harmful.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, those are all thoughts. Those thoughts of you not having enough within you for what you need. I think that in my estimation, and with the place I've come to with reading my specific religious text, and as a side note, it's not that I will only ever read the Bible or that I only have read the Bible, but I'm trying to get that shit down first, and then we'll move on to other books, right? I'm not trying to be cloistered in the Bible, but I am. It is the first language that I speak, whether I like it or not. So I'm trying to understand it the best I can. But I believe the more I read the Bible, I think the Bible is about these cycles of institutions gaining power, becoming massive, overtaking people, making people downtrodden. And I think the Bible and the good news of the gospel is deliverance from the institution that makes you feel like you're not enough as who you are. And
Absolutely.
that's a radically
Yeah,
different gospel than I was taught.
absolutely. And I think that's why Jesus was such a radical, because there was no hint of violence,
Mm-hmm.
no sort of military conquest,
Mm-hmm.
that, so many wanted him to be this, riding on a horse with a sword in
Yep.
hand, coming ready to slay the
Yep.
Romans. And intentionally, through symbols and through, various acts, communicating, I'm going to bring peace,
Mm-hmm.
and I am willing to oppose this mimetic bent of within society that I think we see, gravitate. We all gravitate in some capacity toward this scapegoaty,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
this bloodthirst, almost like,
Yeah.
oh, here's someone we need to, take out all of our aggression on
Yeah.
them, kind of thing. And with what the kingdom was presented to be like, was completely upside down from any sort of that, it's all about the powerful.
Yep.
And survival of the fittest kind of thing.
Yep.
And really about elevating those, the poor, the needy,
Yep.
the widow, the orphan, the you know the sex worker,
Mm-hmm.
whoever it may be, that is seen as like, that people don't understand how radical it was for Jesus to have lunch with a tax collector.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, some of these things that are so lost
Mm-hmm.
in our modern understanding,
Yep.
where historically speaking was such a radical act of compassion.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, when we can embody that same kind of love and peacemaking and generous spirit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So many people are going to feel like they belong, that have never felt like they've had permission to belong.
Yes. Yeah, and I like to refer to the gospel as the gravitron. I don't know if you've ever been to a county fair or to a carnival, but did you ever go on or see that ride? I can't go on that ride. Oh, bad news
The
bears.
thing that
The
spins
thing
around
that
and, like,
spins around and
yeah.
it sucks you to the wall. The gospel is like the gravitron, sans the puking. But the further the more the gospel ramps up, the more gas you give the gospel, the further it pushes you to the margins. And I think that in modern spirituality as a whole, and in modern ethos as a whole, particularly in Western ethos, because this is not something you necessarily see in a non-Western perspective, but in a Western perspective, it's this institutionalism, and it's this centralization and consolidation of power, and you don't see that rampant like individual consolidation. And by individual, I mean either like corporations or individual people. You don't see that necessarily in other societies. You see communal value, you see tribal, you see like in Native American thought, right? When you would take more than was your due share, it was considered a mental illness. And I think that we've ended up in a place in modernity where we have these systems, be them political, be them societal, or be them specifically religious, that want to keep a hold of the power. And it ends up creating a situation of dis-ease within the world. And I think that so many people suffer from that because the thing about the institution is most people are on the outside.
Absolutely. The only thing that power is meant to do is to elevate those who have been taken advantage of by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Power begets power. Power works to consolidate power. Power works to keep the people not in power completely not in power. Yeah, it works to sustain itself. And we have a modern day theocracy in America, where like,
Yeah.
and I don't mean to talk too much about America, but to me, in my mind, all of these things interconnect, right?
Well, yeah, and also because of the horrible effects of uh, colonialism and like the whole colonization that has happened through missionary work overseas and
Yes.
different things like that, these American ideals have been conflated with what Christianity or the gospel is,
Yep.
and it's completely whitewashed so many beautiful cultures,
Yeah.
and it caused them to feel like they're not able to be who they are. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you even have people like fucking Louis Giglio that are investing money and time to travel to places like Uganda to support anti-LGBTQ hate laws. Like literally, there's a documentary about this. I think it was in Call Me Cuckoo, which I could be wrong that it was from this because I went on a little bit of a binge one time with documentaries, which is actually not one time. That's my whole life. But there's some video footage of American evangelicals, in specific Louis Giglio, traveling to Uganda to actually work with pastors to push forth anti-LGBTQ legislation. And so you have spiritual colonization. We've done
Yeah.
that politically. That's almost obvious to anyone who has eyes, let them see. But we've also done that religiously. Like, motherfucker, Christianity was like kind of born in Africa. And now we're gonna
Yes.
go back over as white people and reintroduce to them what we stole from them, bastardized, and now are handing back to them? Like, it's just so egocentric and it's so harmful. It's harmful to the people who they're doing it to, and it's harmful to us who are trying to come out of it. It's devastating. Like, bad theology really kills. And I
Absolutely.
feel like people don't want to take responsibility for that, but any religious idea is a dangerous religious idea. To quote a previous guest and friend of mine, Dr. Rachel Mikva, any religious idea is a dangerous idea. And you have to be self-critical, and you have to be careful, and you need to be heretical and ask why we are perpetuating that religious belief. Otherwise, you're just wanton going around and clubbing people with it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And truly in its essence, I would hope for any sort of religious system to be a healing balm, not a club
Exactly.
to hit people with.
Exactly.
Not something to beat someone into submission, to modify their behavior, right? But something to bring someone to a true self-actualization,
Yes.
where they're able to be truly themselves and then in turn benefit the world around them.
Because they are who they were made to be.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? In Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 13, I want to say, but it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And people want to use that for purity culture, but I think perhaps another take on what that verse really meant was like, you were made to be that someone fiercely, and protect yourself from all forces who tell you not to be who you were created to be. I think there's some merit in that. Speaking of being who you're created to be, you mentioned earlier that you went to Bible college. I would love to hear more about that because I'll be real vulnerable. There's so much of me that just feels like I was hoodwinked. And there's so much of me that genuinely feels embarrassed. And I think that that's common. From what I hear, that's common of people who've survived abusive situations. Like, how did I let myself get into this standpoint? But I mean, bro, I didn't just drink the Kool-Aid, I double fisted it. And I'd love to hear about your experience with Bible college and how you are moving forward to reclaim that which could easily seem foolish, how you're making that and molding that and understanding that and integrating it into your psyche in a way that is valuable instead of shame producing. I'd love to hear some about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rachel and I met at the Bible college we went to.
Okay.
And ring by spring, typical kind of thing. We were talking about this.
Do you avoid saying the name, or are you allowed, like, are
I don't want to give them publicity.
Perfect. Okay.
So
glossing on ring by spring.
Let's just say it was started by a very well-known evangelical figurehead. It's not a big school, but if I said the figurehead's name, people would
Would
know
know
him.
it. Okay. Okay.
So anyway, my point is that so it's very reformed. So a lot of teaching through that.
Yeah.
Through that lens. I will say this, that a lot of the professors there went to John MacArthur's seminary. So if that gives you any idea of sort of the angle and bent of the theology that was regurgitated, there you go.
Yep.
I did have some, I will say, to have a more gracious sort of take on some of it, I did have some very kind-hearted professors that didn't all do harm.
Right.
So I want to make that clear.
Right.
They, unfortunately, are stuck in the hypnosis of a lot of that theology. But I will say that, even during some dark times, I had some professors that were very, very kind.
Yeah,
to me.
I think as with most cases, the onus is on the institution, and there's always bad people in the institution, but there's always good ones too. So we got to give credit where credit is due, right?
Absolutely. So, but with that, talking about taking the treasure from the trash, or taking the meat and spitting out the bones kind of thing. I really was able to understand a lot of church history. I took a class that was 5 semesters long. I ended up taking 4 out of the 5 semesters.
Okay.
And in that experience, it gave me, I guess, a good foundation, and it was called Foundations, which is kind of ironic. It gave me a good foundation of understanding the history of the church and a lot of the harm that was done at the hands of the institution.
Yep.
And some of these patterns that kept repeating themselves over and over and over. And I feel like, again, because of that, I'm able to frame a lot of our experience now, that what we're seeing in the rise and fall of evangelicalism in America.
Yep.
We're really seeing this happen again, another sort of, turning of the tide.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure I'm on the right side of history.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so anyway, Bible college was crazy. A lot of also very hard and awful things about it. But at the same time, I think that it was through that I was able to still recover and hold on to this passion for, helping people understand what is Scripture actually getting at. And, maybe it's not needing to be weaponized like it often is. And helping to, make it more of a blunt edge rather than a sharp edge that's doing a lot of damage and tearing apart lives.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Anyway, that's some of my takeaway from that experience.
Yeah.
But
there has to be some sort of reclamation. Like, man, for me, I think that the most I could claim on any given day is a Christian agnostic, because, and a reluctant one at that, reluctant only when it comes to referring to Christians, because have you met the rest of those fuckers? they're my people. I can speak about them. But I think that if I'm being intellectually honest, I've never seen God. You know what I mean? I can't know. But there has to be I have to reclaim something about that time, or I just feel like a fool. And I feel like for me, a lot of what I've learned is solidarity with the least of these, and trying to work towards that and implement that in every area of my life. And I think that that's been a really hard thing for me, though, because for so long the pendulum was over here for so long that when I after my second bout with trying to get ordained and just running into situation after situation, the pendulum swung all the way over here, and I was not trying to ever go back. And my wife was just quietly in the corner, like loving me and saying, okay, that's where you are now. You know what I mean? And then, after my video went viral, she's like, maybe you should do conversations, like really seriously remount it. And I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden I'm getting my PhD. But there's some sort of reclamation that has to happen for me, because otherwise that was just such an embarrassing failure on my part. But I think part of that process that I'm going through is knowing that I was led down that road somewhat unwittingly, and letting some of that responsibility go off myself that I was taught to carry myself, because I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the only way I can sleep at night. You know what I mean? Like, I've said and done some embarrassing things that really hurt some people.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't, I guess that's part of my own journey of deconstruction and religious trauma and healing from that, is figuring out how to make that make sense in the world, and how to heal from that, and even how to justify the fact that I owe $80,000 for a degree on like how to be a pastor. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy, but I'm glad that you're finding a way through that, and some redemptive value in that, because it's such a heavy weight to carry. And I really hope that people who are listening to this conversation can know that you're not alone. You weren't stupid. You were doing the best you could with what you had. And now we're all going to kind of let go of this perfection aim, and we're going to muddle through it together and figure it out, right?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a quick kind of tack on to what I was saying earlier. I really think that part of what I'm thankful for is because both formal and informal education and study that I've done has given me enough knowledge and terminology to be able to then speak back and push back against the institution and system that has done so much harm.
Yes.
So for me, if it's only for that, like, I'm thankful.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to see countless more people have to go through the same experience that I have. And granted, probably on the spectrum of people who have gone through religious trauma, I'm probably not on the highest extreme form of it. Right. And I know that. But I want to make sure that I can do whatever I can with any sort of voice that I have or I can contribute to having, to be able to topple the powers at play that are preying on such precious, precious people who are either believing that they're not enough, that they can't live openly in their sexuality, that they can't believe certain things theologically, whatever it may be that they feel is off limits and would cause them to not be accepted or loved by God, or like they would feel like they're not able to accept themselves, or whatever it may be. I want to do whatever I can to push back against the narrative that is continuing to squash so many people.
Yes.
And
I think that's a lot of where I'm finding the value for myself as well, is that, like, you can call me names, you can misgender me, you can say this, that, or the other, but at the end of the day, I really actually do still know more than you. And that might be cocky, but no, like, you're not going to get away with this, especially when you can't hold your own in a conversation about the faith that you beat people over the head with. And it's my hope that, I like to sum it up like this. Like, I've spent so long dealing with the church that it is time for them to have to deal with me. I made a video on YouTube about how I'm the crazy gay uncle at the family reunion of Christianity. Like, I'm the guy that they don't want to come to the family reunion because they can't disavow, but he's crazy. Like, that's me with Christianity, right? Like I have spent so long dealing with my neck being under the boot of you motherfuckers, that now y'all gotta deal with me, because you can't come at me like, oh, that's not in the Bible, because I'll be like, which version of the Bible have you read? You know what I mean? I'll be like, did you read the Greek or the Hebrew? Like, what language are we talking? Because I've read the Bible in 4 of them, and I've read them in probably 40 translations. So come at me, bro, is essentially my stance towards the church. And if I can be that person that stands in the gap to shield people from that abuse, you can believe I'm going to do it. And evangelical Christianity is such a minority of Christianity, but they take all of the space in the conversation. So I'm trying to take a little bit of that back, you know?
That's so true. That's so good. They're not gonna silence any of us, right?
No.
And I think that's what I love about what's happening throughout deconstruction spaces, is that people are finding their voice.
Absolutely.
They've been choked for so long, muzzled for so long, gaslit for so long, to question or to doubt their experience, to disbelieve what they're observing, to backpedal when they start to piece things
Piece
together.
things together that are there.
Now we're like, enough is enough. No more. I'm done with this bullshit,
Yep.
and you're not going to tell me otherwise.
Absolutely, I agree
And I love
100%.
that. So
That's where I'm at. I mean, you're not going to tell me otherwise, period, and you're not going to tell them otherwise, because I've been given a certain amount of gifts in terms of communication, ability to communicate under pressure, and ability to kind of have a thick skin, and so I've got to use them, because there are people who are in the same vein as us, right? But they're never going to feel comfortable challenging the institution. So like, game on. You know what I mean? Well,
absolutely.
we've about hit an hour here. It looks like an hour and 2 minutes and 37 seconds to be exact. So I want to respect your time, send you back to hang out with your lovely wife. I'm going to go hang out with mine. But I would like to say, you know, I like to end every podcast with 2 questions. The second one's going to be your contact information, so don't sweat that one. But before that, I would love for you to let me know, if there is one thing or one kind of idea that you want people to take away from this conversation, what would you want them to remember or to take away or to act upon, or, you know, etc.?
Wow.
I know. I like to just ask tiny little bite-sized questions.
Yeah, right. No pressure. No, I mean, honestly, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ironically.
Yes.
I honestly, ironically, there is no pressure.
Yeah.
For you, no matter where you are in your spirituality or non-spirituality, atheist
Mm-hmm.
or well, whoever,
Mm-hmm.
no matter where you are, there is no pressure to conform to a mold. You are free to be who you are. And I hope that no matter where you are, what you believe, what you see and think about the world and yourself, the divine, that you know you're loved and you are enough.
I'm done. I'm just gonna hit end right now. No, that's perfect, and that's it. There really isn't, like, you come to this thing as you, and that is enough for all of it, right? That's the thing. I want to fall asleep thinking about that tonight in like 2 hours, because I get so amped up by conversations I can't sleep. So can you do me a favor, Derek, and could you please here is your chance to shamelessly plug as much as you want. How can folks get in touch with you? How can they get involved with your work? How can they support you? Lay it all out there for us.
Yeah, you know, if you could send a carrier pigeon and somehow it makes it to me, I would be so impressed, and I would want to meet you in person.
Dope.
So someone wants a carrier pigeon, somehow, some way. Just
it's gonna happen one of these days. Keep putting it out there.
Spread your wings and fly to the heretics. So,
I love it.
Anyway, no, but you can find us on Instagram at Your Favorite Heretics. That's where we're most active. We are on Twitter. Rachel's handle on Twitter is Rachel's a Heretic. Mine is Derek the Heretic. All right. Keeping with the theme.
Yep.
Same on TikTok, Derek the Heretic, and so yeah, that, and Rachel on TikTok is Carrot Slayer with 2 R's at the end. So
I follow both of you, so can I ask where Carrot Slayer came from? Because I'm just like curious.
Yes. So Rachel was actually vegan for, I think, a little over 10 years.
All right. All right.
And she chose that as like her AIM name or something
yes.
like that.
Okay.
And then it kind of became a moniker her friends used to call her as a nickname. So Carrot Slayer just kind of stuck.
Perfect.
She has a carrot tattoo on her ear. So anyway.
Thank you for scratching that itch.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the story behind that. But yeah, Your Favorite Heretics on Instagram is probably the best spot to stay connected to our work. For merch that I mentioned like this, or No, I Don't Want to Grab Coffee and some other stuff as well, just go to yourfavoriteheretics.com.
All right.
You can check out our stuff there. And then we also have a really, really amazing Facebook community group. I think we're nearing 3,000 wonderful people on our private, confidential Facebook group. So no matter where you are, whether you're atheist and want nothing to do with religion, or you're like, I can't shake this Christian label and I'm trying to reclaim my faith, which I can totally relate.
Yep.
No matter where you're at in the spectrum, it's a wonderful space. We love encouraging people to share anything from a lighthearted meme
Mm-hmm.
to, hey, this is a real big struggle. I don't know how to approach this
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. So
Awesome.
it's been such a special group, and I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Awesome.
our shameless little plug.
Do you folks have a YouTube also?
We do have a YouTube page. We have not been as active on it. So
Okay.
this is kind of a good little kick in the butt to say we do have a few videos on there.
All right.
Check out. So you can look up your favorite heretics on YouTube as well.
Perfect.
But our hope is to eventually start kicking back up conversations.
Awesome.
No pun intended. And bring on different people. Also have some conversations between Rachel and I.
Absolutely.
Those are fun too. So
yeah,
we'll probably get back to that sometime.
Awesome. We'll keep our eyes out for it. So, Derek, it has been a pleasure. Hopefully next time we do this, we get to meet Rachel. Tell her I said hello. And if you ever need someone to talk, like, I know a guy. So. But seriously, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. I found you guys kind of early on in my deconstruction, and I was like, my whole goal has been to get labeled a heretic, which happens very quickly, really, when you come out. But I might even graduate to apostate status. I've got that a couple times, so I think I can claim it. But it is always infinitely comforting to me to know I'm not the only one going through this, and it is also exciting to see you doing the work you can with what you have where you are. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Leo, it's been such a pleasure. I feel like I've made a new friend,
yes.
And I'm really, really thankful for everything that you're doing, and so love your story and all the work that you're after as well. So
thank you so much.
I know this will be the first of many future conversations.
I'll take you up on that. Everybody who's watched, thank you so much. This has been Conversations. We come together regularly and intentionally to facilitate spiritually minded conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter where you want to go, this is a place for you, and your voice matters. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week here. You can also check us out on YouTube at Conversations Official. You can check out conversationsofficial.com. We do have some merch on there. We are also available. There's an option for you to help support us on Patreon. All of those things are listed on conversationsofficial.com. And of course, you can check out the Facebook anytime. And we also have a Facebook group called Conversations Official Group. So feel free to check it out. But the most important thing is that whoever's watching this right now, that you know that you're not alone, that you find your people, and that you are able to be loved and accepted and to grow and become whole, no matter what page it's on. So thank you for watching, everybody. Derek, thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to talk to all of you again. Have a good night.